What I'm going to do today is to, I'm presenting a slideshow that it follows a train of interpretation about Buffalo Bill and his relationship with the artists he dealt with that I published in this magazine that Jeremy held up, Montana Magazine. The title of the article in there is Not an Imaginary Picture Altogether, but Parts. I'll read you a little later where that comes from. And the subtitle of that is The Artistic Legacy of Buffalo Bill Cody. This title is a shameless ripoff from the movie of Robert Altman, 1977, Buffalo Bill and the Indians. And I will tell you that I am much more respectful of Buffalo Bill than Altman was in this presentation. I never know who's in the audience. In Cody, I can expect a lot more people who know a little bit about Buffalo Bill, but I'm just going to give just the fastest little introduction to Buffalo Bill so that I'm sure that everybody's more or less on the same page. He was born in 1846 in Iowa, grew up on the western edge of American settlement for his first 25 years. He hunted buffalo for the railroad, scouted for the Army, guided famous parties of hunters until probably about 1873. He scouted for the Army until 1877. When Ned Buntline, who was following his own money trail through the West, published a dime novel titled Buffalo Bill, King of the Bordermen in 1869, Cody saw an opportunity for himself, and he followed Buntline east in 1873, and for the next 10 years he starred as himself in a series of rough melodramas that traveled literally all over the United States. What states there were. After 1878, he worked full-time in his stage productions, giving up all of his previous enterprises, and then in 1883 he inaugurated the Wild West Show, which was a great arena production dedicated to showing the life and history of the prairie through his own experience. The success of this show in America led him and his partner, Nate Salisbury, to undertake a tour of Europe that lasted most of 5 years from 1887 to 1892. That experience made Buffalo Bill the most famous American in the world, and it also opened his eyes to cultures that he had not known of. In particular, his stay at the Exposition Universelle in Paris in 1889 showed him things about the power of art that he perhaps had not even suspected. And that is where our story begins. This is not an image from 1889 from the Paris expedition. This is an 96 image, an advertisement, one of the many posters. If everyone has been through the museum, there are posters all over the place, and you know, poster art in the later 19th century, not only for the Wild West, but for circuses and all other enterprises, was a really highly developed genre. Buffalo Bills were among the best. This poster, although it's 1896, it refers to the Paris experience and shows us how important his visit to Paris in 1889 really was. In the first, there's this obvious comparison between Buffalo Bill Cody, our local hero, and that other guy, Napoleon I. Now, Napoleon doesn't look very happy up there. He's kind of slouched, he's defeated. This is an image that is lifted from a painting of Napoleon by Jean-Paul Ernest Meissonier, called simply Napoleon in 1814. This one over here, however, proud, virile, looking out over the prairie, looking as if he can handle whatever comes up. For my money, the most interesting image up there is this one. That is the image of Rosa Bonheur, who was among France's most famous painters. She had recently, Buffalo Bill was there in 1889. In 1887, one of her paintings, a giant painting called The Horse Fair, a picture of a Percheron auction held in France, had been purchased by Cornelius Vanderbilt for $80,000 and installed in the Met. So she's a very important painter. And it was her specialty to paint horses and animals in general, but especially horses. And she was drawn to the Wild West in a big way. She came, the show stayed there for 7 weeks. She was set up on the grounds of the Wild West show with her easel and her brushes for 6 of those 7 weeks. I have not been able to verify this, but I suspect she was the first painter to ever take up this kind of long-time residence in a Wild West camp. After her, it became not at all unusual. Famous painters like Charles Schreygel and Frederic Remington, whom we'll see in a minute, and painters of whom we've heard very little, would come and set up shop on the grounds and paint. And Cody and Salisbury both really enjoyed that. Cody was also caught up in this exposition had art was very much at the center of it. National competitions among all the European and American nations for who would get to show in this exposition. And Cody attended all of these shows, and he could not help but come to understand art somewhat differently than he had done. But surely the most important thing that happened to him at that time was this: Bonheur's portrait, which became his famous, or his favorite portrait, painted in that summer of 1889. He could barely stand to be away from it. When he was called away to try to be of some assistance in the troubles with the Lakota on Pine Ridge in the winter of 1890, his house in Northridge, Nebraska burned down. Somebody sent him a telegram: house on fire. He sent a telegram back: save the Rosa Bonheur and let everything else go to blazes. So he returned from Europe with a new conceit of himself. That is the first part of my interpretation in this. And as a result, when he came back from Europe, he began to nurture painters, fostering relationships with established artists, and generally began to mind the making of his legacy in pictures as well as in words. From about 1897 on, he worked with a dozen or so artists, old friends who painted on the side, new young men, some of the premier artists of his time. The results of his activities as an art patron or a collector or a sponsor of significant artists were very mixed, as we'll see. But the process was very interesting to watch. From my point of view, one of the interesting things is that this turn toward the world of art coincided with, and in some ways proceeded from, his move to Wyoming, which happened in 1895. He and his partners formed the Shoshone Irrigation Company, founded the town of Cody, developed the irrigation project around town. Cody wanted to employ painters to enable him to present a view of his new home in the West to people in the East. One thing that his painters did was to paint scenery from the Bighorn Basin on backdrops for stage productions. He also kept some of these individual oil paintings that I'll be talking about in his tent when the Wild West camp was set up, so that people could see him and talk about it. When the town was up and running, Cody wanted to build a first-class hotel. And in his mind, a first-class hotel was one that was decorated on the walls with art. He told his sister Julia that he planned to have as many as 200 paintings and etchings by the likes of Frederic Remington and others. He never quite made 200, but the Irma was a well-decorated hotel. A large number of the paintings I'm going to be talking about here hung in the Irma. They're stored over here, although they don't often make it to the walls of the Whitney Gallery today. In addition to the working with these painters in this way, he also began to do a little collecting. He got interested enough in art. There were a couple of people whose work he just wanted to own. And he sponsored the work of other artists, notably the most famous of all the ones he worked with, and that would be Frederic Remington. So I'm going to go through here. First, I'm going to talk about a set of paintings that he commissioned that were based on his experience as a hunter here in the Bighorn Basin. Secondly, we're going to go through a set of paintings that were intended to put a very favorable light on his own particular legacy from the West. And then finally, we'll look at some of his collecting and patronage. So, here's one. I think you probably haven't heard of Henry H. Cross. I hadn't heard of Henry H. Cross until I came here and began to look for things. Cross was a crony of Cody's. They had both scouted together. One of two painter scouts who show up in this. They had scouted together in the Kansas and Colorado area in the late 1860s. Cross, when he stopped scouting, went in for painting, particularly animal painting, and he had long and lucrative contracts with Marcus Daly in Butte and Lucky Baldwin in Arcadia, California. But he was at home and kind of at loose ends in Indiana when the Wild West came through there, and they reconnected. Cody invited him to come on out, join one of the hunts. Unfortunately, I don't know. You see it says 1897. It could just as easily have been 1899. Cross is very uncertain in his dates, and in fact sometimes I think he's intentionally misleading in his dates. But there's no other evidence that pins him down whether it was one or the other. This is a very large painting. It's a painting that many people find offensive. The buffalo is, I think, he's offensively anthropomorphic. That is to say, he's acting like a bully. He's not being a buffalo there. If he were really being a buffalo, the Indian wouldn't look so good, and he would be off someplace else eating. He wouldn't be posing over the body of his defeated enemy. But Cross had a number of strange ideas. There is a painting that hangs in the wall of the Irma Hotel that unfortunately it's part of the collection in the Whitney Gallery, but it's never been photographed. So I couldn't get a copy of it to show. But it's called Shoshone Canyon. And it's taken from east of town, and it shows what the ground where Cody now is might have looked like before the Shoshone Irrigation Company arrived. There's a most peculiar herd of elk grazing out there, about 24 of them, a bull and a cow grazing and eating peacefully side by side here, and then another couple over there, and then another couple over here. They're all paired up nicely. One of our sources on the early days of the Irma Hotel says that Bill Cody and George Beck used to sit together in the bar where this the Shoshone Canyon painting hung, and they would lift their glasses and they would toast to the amiability of the does, and to the docility of the bucks, and to the wildlife knowledge of the artist. It was a anyway, you can see it if you go for lunch over at the Irma Hotel. Cross was not much of a painter. Cody didn't seem to care. He was a friend. He continued his friendship and in fact extended his patronage to Cross in a number of other ways in future years. Cross painted some other things when he was here that are in the building here. They're small studies of animals. One of the ways we know he was here on a hunt, because there are deer and elk and at least one other animal that's been killed. Frequently there's an Indian with it who has perhaps killed it. Those are interesting small studies. They're very unpretentious. They're really just looking at what's there. So Cross could paint, but his vision of himself seemed to get in the way. He didn't do any more of this kind of documenting the wilderness painting for Cody after this first visit. Cody had a hunt every year when the Wild West closed. It was a way to celebrate not having to run the show for a while. It was also the fact that he was never happier than when he was hunting. He would always come and he would bring political figures and wealthy businessmen, as many as he could get to Cody. He would generally bring Irontail and 2 or 3 other Lakota chiefs from Pine Ridge. And a whole group of them like this would get together. And they would hunt, and they'd have a good time. Cody usually had somebody around with a camera. This is the 1901 hunt, as you can see. That's Cody's handwriting down there at the bottom of it. The Life I Love, Camp, head of Shoshone River, November 20th, 1901. That camp is just a mile or 2 from where Pahaska is today. Well, can you see Bill Cody? Tell me when to stop. When do I get to Cody? Stop. You're pretty good. You would be good. There he is. Now, how do you know it's Cody? The beard, the jacket. What about the hat? If you go through the museum, you'll see that virtually every picture of Bill Cody, his hat is framing his face. That's the way that he makes sure that the people in the back row can see him. That's all right. Now, this picture was good, but it wasn't good enough for him. He met a young painter at about the time shortly after this hunt, named Irving R. Bacon, and he gave him the photograph and said, "You think you could find a way to produce me an oil painting?" Now, this is the kind of oil painting that he liked. If we go through man by man, we'll find that just about everybody's in the same place where they were in the photo, with one obvious exception. Everybody, when he's holding the camp, he's just one of the guys. He often was just one of the guys. But he didn't want to be seen over the next century as just one of the guys. So, The Life I Love, painted by Irving R. Bacon, 1902. The 1903 hunt was painted by another one of his cronies, Charles Stobie, sometimes called Mountain Charlie. He, like Cross, he had been a scout companion of Bill Cody's in the 60s. And Stobie had gone into art in a big way. He actually ran a studio in Denver and one in Chicago and went back and forth between the two for 25 years at the end of the 19th century. And I don't know how it came up that Cody invited Stobie, but Stobie came on their 1902 hunt. The painting is dated 1903, but it's from the hunt in 1902. The hunt actually began from the Irma Hotel, the night of the Irma Hotel dedication, November 18th, 1902. The next morning, they were all on their horses riding up the South Fork. They went to a place called Hidden Camp Bob, which is up above Cody's TE ranch. Stobie was an interesting artist. He painted this for Cody. But if you were to look at that, at least I'd say Cody might stand out. The other humans don't stand out. The people don't. What stands out is that great face of the mountains and the way that the camp nestles in that wonderful scenery. Stobie was keeping a notebook while he was doing this painting, and he would write notes to himself, and one of them was, keep in mind Bierstadt's Rocky Mountains. So he thought of himself as a considerable painter if he's going to be comparing himself to Bierstadt. When he shipped this off to Europe, because Bill Cody had gone to Europe for another, this was a 3 or 4 year visit in 1903, Cody wrote back, and Cody didn't like it. He didn't like the fact that his foot looked so big. He didn't like the fact that he couldn't recognize his friends there. He said, nobody liked Stobie's Indians. So everybody thought it was a very showy painting, but nobody liked his Indians. He said, I don't think a hunting camp should have Indians and mongrel dogs in it. And then there's this paragraph. I think a painting should be made as true to life as possible for it to have true value, and the camp to look inviting. So one would say, I would like to be there. This camp of yours looks too cold. Not a fire in sight. Indian women and children sitting around in the snow. I don't think there should be women and children and mongrel dogs on a hunt. I want the painting for myself to be as near true to nature as possible. So in after years, I can say, there's Charlie Christie, or Gus Thompson, or Roy Myers, and recognize them. I want a painting of myself and my friends who were with me to keep to remember the hunt. Work your own self in there so that I can say, there's Charlie Stobie, the artist. He said, and I know what I want. Not an imaginary picture altogether, but parts. In other words, he wanted his painting true to life, except where he didn't. Stobie's plan was, this was a test canvas. He mailed it to him in London. Buffalo Bill replied, on the big one, take a little more care. He did, but it still wasn't a very good painting. In fact, I was really repelled by it the first time I saw it. It until recently at least, maybe still, hangs in one of the curatorial hallways upstairs. It's kind of a lifeless painting. This one here is from the Buffalo Bill Museum and Grave Gallery. That's down in Lookout Mountain, Colorado. Because we don't have a photograph of the one that hangs upstairs here. But evidence points to the high likelihood that Bill Cody did not pay Stobie for this. He gave him $200 expenses at the end of the trip and sent him on home. But it appears from letters that we have in the Colorado Historical Society that Stobie wasn't paid. And Stobie never worked for Cody again, which would be a pretty good indicator. So, 1904, or excuse me, the 1903 camp. And these are dated 1903 because they were done right away. He took Irving R. Bacon along with him on this. He had wanted to have Bacon the year before and couldn't get him, so he took him along this time. And again, they went up South Fork. And Bacon painted these two. He painted more, but these two in particular, Cody liked a great deal. As you can see, this is not a hunting camp picture that looks like a hunting camp picture. This is something that has some action and some interest inherent in it. He took photographs, and Bacon had a particular talent for bringing life to photographs. A lot of people can't do that, but he could do that. And these are both very striking. They're watercolors. He put them together from the photographs, but they're watercolors. They're done right away. That's the 1903 hunt. The 1904 hunt was the year they opened Pahaska. So you see the new Pahaska hunting lodge. It's now the old one tucked back behind Pahaska, but this was the brand new one in 1904. This is painted by a young man who had just sort of caught on, Robert Farrington Elwell. He was from Boston. He'd done a little bit of illustrating for youth novels, and he really wanted to be a painter, and so he would show up at the Buffalo Bill Wild West show when it was showing outside of Boston, and Cody and Salisbury took a liking to him, and Cody eventually invited him to Wyoming to come out and work for him. And he also tried to help him get illustrations published in Eastern magazines. Elwell was also a photographer. He may have been the photographer who took the 1901 The Life I Love photo. He was surely the photographer who took this one. And then Cody asked him to turn it into an oil painting. In the photograph, I'm sorry, I don't have the photograph to match. I've seen the photo, but I didn't prepare the photo to match the thing here. Cody was not standing out in front there looking like Napoleon without his horse. He was just back in the line with the rest of them. The painter here has just sort of rearranged them so that Cody takes front and center. But you look a long time to find 17 more wooden-looking individuals. This is this reminds me of when I tried to paint a moose as a sophomore art student at Powell High School. It didn't look at all like a moose. That moose didn't look any happier than these people do. So Elwell was not a particularly good painter, certainly not this early in his life. But here we are 3 years later. This is the 1907 hunt. Elwell was the painter. I think he again worked from a photograph, although I've not been able to find that photograph. But both in either as a photo or as a finished painting, the change is dramatic. He's learned a great deal about composition, a great deal about what makes an interesting painting. This man sitting here, everybody in Cody should recognize George Beck. He always wears his hat like that. He's sitting there cleaning a rifle, getting ready to shoot. Bill Cody's probably giving him a ration of crap because that's their relationship. But he's relaxed. He looks interesting. This over here is almost certainly Tom Foley from Omaha. That's what this hunt was called, the Camp Foley hunt, which meant probably that he paid for most of it. And then they didn't bother to fit anybody else in. There were other people on the hunt, but they weren't. It wasn't necessary. Being the notion of documenting each individual who was there was less important than producing an interesting painting. So, Camp Foley, 1907. It was not the end of the hunts. Cody continued to have these fall hunts for at least another 2 years. But this is the last of the hunting cap paintings. We're going to double back a little bit now, and we're going to get into what I call the legacy paintings, the use of painters to perpetuate the fame of Bill Cody. Cody had been awarded a Congressional Medal of Honor back at about 1872 or 73. It was later taken back because the Congressional Medal of Honor was supposed to be given only to enlisted members of the United States military. And he was not. He was a civilian scout. But he was in the book, The First History of the Medal of Honor, which was published in 1901. Buffalo Bill Cody got to narrate his own story of his winning of the medal. It was an insignificant action in which some unfortunate Indians had stolen some horses, and the Army detachment went off to get them, and at one point, two of them were trying to get away on one horse, and the legend has it that Cody shot them both with one shot. Buffalo Bill in Pursuit, or Two with One Shot, is the full title of this painting. When Bacon didn't have a photograph to work from, so he had to show that he was actually pretty good on his own. He had done the engraving for the history of the Congressional Medal of Honor, and Bill Cody had seen that engraving and said, "I like that, can you get me an oil?" And so he did. Turned right around, got him an oil. This is the first piece of work that Bacon did for Cody. After that, he did some other miscellaneous things, did some oils from paintings of other members of the Wild West troupe. But they began to work together on producing a new rendering of this most famous encounter, the battle with Yellow Hand, the fight with Yellow Hand on War Bonnet Creek in Nebraska. Bacon really didn't just want to listen to what Cody wanted. He wanted to work with Cody to produce a new vision. Cody's first letter, in which he said what he wanted, was the traditional, and this moment had been rendered by dozens of different people. There's an entire article also in Montana Magazine about 6 years ago just on the paintings of this one battle. But the traditional rendering of the painting is with Bill Cody with his foot on the chest of the Indian, his red right hand holding the dripping knife, and his left hand holding the scalp high in the air, and the cavalry cheering him on, shouting, "The first scalp for Custer." Happened in the summer of 1876. There'd been a lot of controversy about that, and there'd been a lot of, and Bacon was obviously aware of other accounts, and so he kept pushing Cody, and together they produced what is actually a pretty good naturalist rendering of an encounter between two isolated individuals. I mean, there's some Indians way back up there, and there's some soldiers way over there, but this is really two guys riding out from the lines just to have a little mano a mano. It's a, I'd be hard pressed to consider it a successful painting. I don't think that Bill Cody looks like one of the greatest horsemen in the American West as he rides there, and by all accounts he was. You can barely see what it is that Yellow Hand is doing. In fact, if it weren't titled The Killing of Yellow Hand, you'd be hard pressed to know that there was any killing going on there. So it's a, and in fact, Bill Cody was not ultimately satisfied with it. It's seems fairly clear that he did not pay for it. It was never showed up in his collection that was kept here in Cody. And to this day, it's not. That is, it hangs occasionally on the walls upstairs by virtue of a loan from Michael del Castello, a private collector. But it's not part of the museum collection. But it's an interesting, in the history of representations of this moment, it's very interesting. The next thing that Bacon did, maybe because Cody didn't like the killing of Yellow Hand, Bacon went to Europe and studied painting. He was trying to become a painter. He went to Munich. He took sustained instruction in how to paint. And in 1980 produced this, The Conquest of the Prairie. This is in all kinds of ways is superior to the painting that we just looked at. If you look at the way the thing is composed, it's so striking that if you draw a line from up there down here, you have a spatial representation of what's happening historically in America in the middle of the 19th century. To the lower side of that line, it's densely populated with people who are being run off the prairie. In fact, the buffalo are hurrying to get off. Everybody else is ready to go in that direction. From the other side, you have the wagon train coming in, you have Buffalo Bill, and we know it's Buffalo Bill in part because the artist told us it was modeled on Buffalo Bill, but also because of the iconography, the hat, the rifle, characteristic way he carried his rifle, and the high-stepping white horse. He looks like he just came off the Wild West show grounds. This doesn't represent a historical moment. Bill Cody never guided emigrant trains. It represents a social historical moment. It's kind of it encapsulates allegorically what's happening in the 19th century. If we had a better reproduction, you could see back over Cody's shoulder there's a city behind it. So this is the march of American progress. And these poor people here are in the way. So they're exiting stage left, everybody else is coming in, and pretty soon it's going to be completely occupied on one side. The conquest is not a military conquest, he's not shooting. It's the inevitable conquest of the march of progress that's happening here. This painting won enormous acclaim in Europe and in the United States. It won grand prize citations in Paris and in Munich. It was shown all over the major cities in the East. It should have been purchased for more money than it was. He painted two of them at the same time. He kept one of them back. He tried to get Cody to buy it. Cody wouldn't buy it. Cody said, "Why don't you paint another one and maybe I'll have some money and I can buy that later." He sold the first one probably for $5,000. He sold the second one eventually to Bill Cody, probably for only $1,000. And that's, this thing is 4 feet high by 10 feet wide. It must have had that much paint. The value of the paint in it must have been $1,000. Bacon continued to work for Cody even though it was hard to get money out of Cody. During the Lakota troubles, the Ghost Dance troubles in 1890, Cody was called to go with, he was called by Nelson A. Miles, the commanding general of the Army. You know, which one of those guys looks more important, Buffalo Bill or the commanding general of the Army over there, Nelson A. Miles? I don't know. But the only time they were together was on the reviewing stand at Pine Ridge after the massacre of Wounded Knee. Cody never was never anywhere near the action. Down here, what we see is represented the stronghold, the place where the Lakota retreated when they expected to be just wiped out. And we're up here surveying. We've got these two guys. The photograph that he worked from was probably a photograph taken on the reviewing stand. And now he's been plunked down in the roughest country of the Badlands of South Dakota. This one we know Bacon did pay for, or Cody did pay for this one. And it's interesting that he paid for it in 1911 when they had the opportunity to pay somebody else for a lot better work. This is the last of the legacy paintings. Charles Schreygel, Rescue at Summit Springs. Schreygel was a serious contender for the title of the best Western artist of his generation. He did a lot of really extraordinary painting. This moment here never happened. This moment is actually based upon the presentation of the Rescue at Summit Springs that had been going on in the Wild West show in the arena. In 1905, Cody had tried to divorce his wife. And he had lost a lot of faith and credibility with middle-class women in America as a result of that. And he was trying, this is an interpretation of Louis Warren, trying it by putting this Rescue at Summit Springs back into the arena production, trying to get people to think well of him as a defender of women in the home again. Here he is at the center of the great classic American romantic tale, the captivity narrative. This is where the rescue of white women by white men from a fate worse than death has been going on since white women first arrived on the shores of Massachusetts in the early 17th century. This is a beautiful painting. This is a great reproduction of it, as good as we can produce in this kind of situation. It's frequently hangs upstairs. It's worth more than all the rest of these paintings put together. This was valued in last time it was appraised in 1987, was valued at $1 million. Every other painting in the Bill Cody collection rolled together wouldn't touch that, probably wouldn't even touch 500,000. So it's very interesting. It's primarily, to me, interesting because it's the way that Cody uses all of these painters to produce his legacy. It isn't that these are things he did, but these are things that he wants to be associated in the public mind with these things. And the painters offer a way. Now, he didn't invent that. I'm sure Napoleon did as much of that as Buffalo Bill. They could be compared in that way as well. To change gears now, to start changing gears and picking up speed. Cody also became a little bit of an art collector. He became interested in other people's work because of the work itself. This is, right now, probably the most interesting painting of Cody's collection that hangs in the museum. People come to see this painting. It's painted by a man named Astley David Middleton Cooper. I've been able to date this as 1903. It's had various other dates attached to it. I'm quite confident in the 1903, and I'll explain to you why. This is what we would call a trompe painting. That is something that fools the eye. Those are not photographs up there. Those are painted. They're calling cards and commercial photographs. This over here is a piece of Indian dancing regalia, and then of course the axes and the peace pipe and the buffalo head. Middleton painted at least 4 of this. I have seen 4 of these images. They go under the family title would be the buffalo head. We have the one here in this building that was, I'm fairly certain, and other critics have said this before me, were painted expressly for Buffalo Bill Cody. And it happens like this. These paintings were painted between 1902 and 1907. The other 3 are held in private collections, and I've seen published images that come from them. The one that was painted in 1902, Cody's show visited San Jose, California, which is where Middleton lived, in the fall of 1902. Middleton was a bon vivant. Middleton liked to play first violin in the San Jose Orchestra. He liked to go out on the town with visiting artists. He liked to have them all over to his house for parties. Cody liked to party. I don't have any doubt that they met, and I'm almost certainly met at Middleton's house where he liked to invite people. Cody would have seen in the studio a painting very much like this, but it had a crappy little picture of Buffalo Bill down about here. There were only the 2 of them, 2 down here, one of Cody and one of Wild Bill Hickok, and they were side by side. There was Sitting Bull was up there. This is Sitting Bull is down here, and Sitting Bull was up here in that other one. What Cody must have said, would you paint me one of these? And produced then a much more handsome Buffalo Bill Cody photograph. I don't know whether he told him where he would like the photograph to be or not, but Albert Frankenstein, who is the critic who's first written on this subject, says that he's pretty sure that's what it was. Because look what that does there. The horns of the buffalo give you Buffalo Bill, and Buffalo Bill is the master of it. Buffalo Bill's the master of the Indian stuff, the buffalo stuff. He's surrounded here by people he knew. They're not people who were part of the Wild West necessarily. Frank Gruard was. Bill Hickok wasn't. In fact, Hickok was dead before the Wild West show ever showed up. Sitting Bull was, for one season, part of it. The pictures scattered around the frame change with each iteration of this painting. But it does, this is the one that we have, and Frankenstein thinks it's the best work that Cooper ever did, and I think it's one of the best of the things that we have in the museum. Cooper also showed him this one and this one, both in 1902. This is no doubt the model for that horse is sitting here in the studio looking at this picture of himself having been hunting the buffalo. The next one is who knows where. Who knows where this comes from? We have this lovely pre-Raphaelite maiden. She should be looking threatened, but she isn't looking threatened. There's a fire being started down there by these lovely children dancing around her. You have this beautiful romantic sort of Hudson School environment, and yet you've got the captivity narrative right here. You've got but it turns the whole thing on its ear. Middleton was a very playful guy. Bill Cody bought this when he first saw it, and there's a legend which Christine Brinza and everyone else who deals with it here has refused to corroborate. The legend is that he kept this painting in his bedroom wall. It is the author of California Painting, a man named Eden Hughes, said that he has seen paintings like this of Cooper's on sale for $25. and that Cooper was in the habit of paying his bar bills at inns all over Northern California by painting something like this for them to hang up in the bar. Anyway, what this does for me is to show that statement of what a painting should be that I read there from that letter that he wrote to Charlie Stobie. He wasn't hidebound by that. He had a kind of a playful nature, and he really admired Cooper's kind of playful nature. So he ended up buying those three, and then when the next time the Wild West showed up in San Jose, here's a completely new take on the buffalo head. Now we've got the combination of the Indian in the studio and the buffalo head, and the whole thing is called Viewing the Curios. And what you got to do, you got to wonder, does he consider these curios? It just puts that question right in front of your head. What you got to try to get into the mind of him, and that's the kind of painter that Cooper was. Now we're going to have 3 minutes to deal with Frederic Remington. I don't have all the Remingtons that that we have in this big, after all, the Whitney Gallery owns the entire Remington studio collection and dozens of Remington oil sketches and things, not as many finished as they would want. This is one that Remington painted in 1899 that was used as an illustration, a frontispiece for a biography written that year by Buffalo Bill's sister called Last of the Great Scouts. Remington was becoming very accomplished at black and white oil as he was trying to paint in the night. 1899 was Remington's first visit to Cody. He came to Cody primarily just to see the place. Bill Cody had invited him to come, although Cody himself was not here. He was off touring with the Wild West show. But whether by long-time arrangement or just late stage happenstance, Remington and his wife arrived in Cody in company with Bill Cody's wife Louisa and Cody's two living daughters, Irma and Arta, none of whom had been to Cody yet by 1899. Bill Cody and Louisa were living apart and had been for some time. They had 2 weeks, George Beck squiring them around town. This little drawing and this one were both done on August 14th, 1899. It says down here, at the Cody Ball. Well, everybody in Cody has seen this picture. This was used every year to promote the ball. And this is Remington there dancing with Louisa. The ball in question was held up at the place where Irma Lodge sits now, up at Irma Lake. And hence the title of this nifty little drawing, Irma Going to Irma. It's actually cataloged in the Whitney Gallery as Irma Going to the Irma Hotel. But the Irma Hotel has still got to wait 3 years to get built in 1899. And since we have very good documentation for the trip that Remington and the Cody family and a lot of other people all went up to Irma together for this party, virtually the whole population of what was called Bighorn County at that time, or at least western Bighorn County, went up there for a big dance. Remington enjoyed that immensely and left us these two neat little drawings. He also took some photographs, and this is a painting that he did in 1901, which Peter Hasrick has linked to Cody. This is apparently a photograph of some people over by Eagle's Nest picking up the mail. I just put this in here not because I think it's a particularly great painting, but because it shows us Remington before he became the really great painter that he was. This is Remington at his sort of every line, every shadow, everything has got to be hard-edged, kind of photographic Remington. 1909. This is also up at Irma Lake. The painting was done in the summer of 1909. The trip to Cody happened in September of 1908. He was in Cody and up the South Fork for only 8 days. He painted probably 30 oil on board sketches, several full-scale oils that he completed when he got back. This one is in the National Cowboy and American Heritage Museum in Oklahoma City. It's a nocturnal painting, as you can tell, and it shows this painter trying to find a way to work with ideas. He's no longer concerned with photographic reproduction. He's trying to get some sense of what people might be thinking or feeling in at the heart of it, and it leaves it there for you to play with. I know what I think, but I'd like everybody to have a chance. Here's, look at that, Shoshone. He as recently as 1905, he scoffed at people who painted landscapes. Now in 1908, he's actually calling himself an impressionist, and he's actually producing landscapes. So this is the redness. I think it's red. Dave? Is it red? Yeah, there are three of us brothers, and two of us are quite colorblind. Anyway, this gold. Well, it's sort of reddish gold, isn't it? Okay. Anyway, this is he's sitting out there on the land outside the Carter Mountain, up on Carter Mountain, on the side of Carter Mountain, outside Irma Lake, and he's producing landscapes. And he's producing, go down in the valley, and he stops, and he has to quickly sketch this thing up. And there's the way that he uses color inside the shaded area there, just to give you the sense of the relationships between inside and outside and shade and sunlight and things like that, is it's a different Remington than we've known before. This painting started out to be a landscape. In fact, the one that we have here in the Whitney, the sketch, is just a landscape. You can set them side by side with this. But he went back. See, the title of this is Top of the Bighorns. Back in his studio in New York, he put a couple of Indians in there. And it really livens the thing up. And he himself, he said, well, Peter Hasrick, who's written most about Remington, said what he was interested in the last decade of his life was looking at the relationship between humans and nature, which is quite different from what he'd done before. But here, this is a very good example, it seems to me, of that. The Idle George Museum's in Indianapolis. This is the one that is it's the cover of the Montana magazine that that Jeremy showed you earlier, that where this interpretation that I've been laying out here is in the Montana magazine. I'll take just a minute to tell you that if you were interested in owning that Montana magazine, we're selling it upstairs, as we're also selling copies of my book on Buffalo Bill just outside the guest shop. This comes from the Sid Richardson collection in Fort Worth. This is a man who can claim to be an impressionist, and yet he's also still the great action painter that he always had been. You look at these Indians are just coming out of the ground. There's no clear break between the horse's hoofs and the explosion of the dust and the dirt and the grass around there. The sketch out of which this is, from which this is drawn, was called Ghost Riders, and you see just that one figure against the background of that's the Bighorn Basin. That's what, if you've ever been up to Irma and you look across the whole basin, that's what it is, and he's working with that. He's trying to fuse these two traditions of action and impression. This and The Hunter's Supper were the two most famous, or two most admired paintings at the last show of Frederic Remington's life, December of 1909, at the Knoedler Gallery in New York. They said that The Hunter's Supper in particular, Knoedler said they could have sold that time and time again. They were selling them for $3,600 a pop. Some critics have said this is one of those sort of foundation moments of American Impressionism in this one. And what I like about it is that both this one and The Hunter's Supper both bring the Bighorn Basin into New York City. They both into the art world in New York City. This place became so important to Frederic Remington. Now remember, Bill Cody was not here. Cody himself was not here. Cody did know that Remington was here, and they sort of generally, said, "Go ahead, use what you need." This has been often regarded as Frederic Remington's last painting, and Peter Hasrick and before him, Harold McCracken, both regard this as part of the production of that last trip in September. That's been challenged by another art historian right now, and it's kind of up in the air. But this is the last one I'm going to show you. This one this is in his museum, the Frederic Remington Museum in Ogdensburg, New York. This is, to me, this is the end of the trail. If this isn't from that camp, it should be. Remington was sleeping at Bill Cody's ranch, the TE on the South Fork. He was tired, he was sick. He weighed over 300 pounds. He'd been sleeping on the ground before he got to that ranch. He was tired. He must have felt the end of his trail coming up, and this looks to me like an end of the trail painting. I don't want to go along with the guy who says, who's a really good historian and a good friend of mine, who says it could very well have been painted before he went to Wyoming, because it looks to me like a good place to end talking about Cody's painting in Wyoming. So I'll leave it up there for a minute, and I'll do what I can to bring this to a finish. So Cody's efforts to patronize and sponsor painters after 1895 were not uniformly successful. He got a number of good paintings out of it, but few of them are of real distinction. His naive confidence in his own judgment of artistic talent, together with his diminishing financial resources, made the project difficult from the beginning. He really should never have invited his old cronies to come in and paint those paintings when he could actually have afforded to hire better painters. Irving R. Bacon, Charles Schreygel both gave him good value. Bacon's hunting and legacy paintings were of consistent quality, but they were never highly valued in the market. His conquest of the prairie and Schregel's rescue at Summit Springs made the most public impact. They both reinforced Cody's mythical self-presentation and raised the artistic level of his collection. Cody's A.D.M. Cooper paintings provided some depth and interest to his collection, but Cody apparently made no effort to acquire the work of the most important painter with whom he maintained relations, Frederic Remington. Of course, Remington's paintings were expensive, and Cody was shoveling money into his Arizona gold mine when Remington produced his great works in the Bighorn Basin. It's nevertheless a striking omission. At a minimum, it indicates a sense of Cody's priorities, in which his paintings of his own South Fork ranches by the greatest painter of his generations were not at the top. His own legacy was more important. He paid Bacon for that picture of himself with Nelson A. Miles in 1911, but he wouldn't buy buffalo runners in the Bighorn Basin or the Hunter's Supper. That a famous collection of art by Remington and Russell and other important Western artists ultimately came to reside in the town that Bill Cody built was a consequence of Buffalo Bill's life, not of his interest in art or artists. Bill Cody had devoted enormous time and energy to publicizing the Bighorn country around the nation, and especially in New York. His sponsorship of Frederic Remington should ultimately be seen in that light. Getting Remington, with his wide array of New York connections, to Cody was a way of casting bread on the waters. The Cody country soon captivated wealthy Wall Street investment banker William R. Coe, who had come to Wyoming to hunt in 1908 and wanted to buy a ranch. To raise money for his Arizona mines, Cody sold his Carter Mountain Ranch, where the Irma Lake pictures were painted, sold that ranch to Coe in 1909. In the course of the negotiation of that sale, Cody visited the Coe family on Long Island, and he brought them all, particularly the sons, to a performance of the Wild West where they rode in the Deadwood stage. Coe was the first, but not more wealthy than he, but just more numerous people, notably someone like Cornelius Vanderbilt Whitney, who also had ridden in the Deadwood stage. More Easterners began to take an active interest in Cody over the decades after Cody's death. Now, William Robertson Coe had known Remington and was interested in collecting some of his paintings. And he also supported the Buffalo Bill Memorial Association and, in fact, left them a bequest of nearly $500,000 when he died in 1955. By that time, a coalition of wealthy Eastern philanthropists and successful local individuals had taken control of the Memorial Association and set about creating the Buffalo Bill Historical Center to replace that old log museum across Sheridan Avenue. In 1954, a $250,000 grant from Whitney enabled them to build a new art gallery. The Whitney Gallery opened in 1959, just in time to house the Remington Studio Collection, which had been purchased by the Coe brothers, who were operating the Coe Foundation. They paid $150,000 in 1959 for the Remington Studio Collection, which is really the historical heart of the Whitney Gallery. The Remington Studio Collection, which contains dozens of sketches from the 1908 trip, underpins the most salient element of the artistic legacy of Buffalo Bill Cody, and that is the Whitney Gallery. 10 years after the Whitney Gallery opened, the new Buffalo Bill Museum opened, joined with the Whitney, and the vision of the Buffalo Bill Historical Center was realized. In this way, the dream of Bill Cody's Wyoming years, a living connection between the Bighorn Basin and the metropolitan East, was given tangible form through the medium of painting. People who travel to Cody today, excuse me, leave with the sense that somehow Buffalo Bill and great art belong together. Maybe, in spite of a great deal of evidence to the contrary, they do. Thank you.